Hello, everyone. I hope that you all are doing well. So, in this session, we will learn about a story point, and it's a powerful estimation technique used in agile teams. So, story points helps us to improve the accuracy and encourage the collaborations and make delivery more predictable. So, let's understand it one by one in detail. So, introductions of story points, let's understand what exactly the story points are. It's a powerful estimation technique for agile teams, and learn how story points can help you and your team to improve the estimation accuracy, foster collaboration, and deliver more predictable results. So basically, when we have one project and when project get assigned to us or our team, so what we do normally, we estimate the time, we estimate the deadlines for the completion of particular task, and based on that, we calculate this estimation on the basis on the scale of hours or on the scale of time. So it says that it is really better to estimate the thing on the basis of story points. So why it is so and how we are going to do these things we are going to understand step by step. So let's start. Story points helps improve estimation accuracy basically, and it's encourage the collaboration, but basically it's a relative measures of efforts. Okay, so we are relatively comparing the things, and based on that we are relatively calculating the efforts required to complete the particular task. Basically it's used in a agile to estimate the size of user stories, and they consider complexity of a task, then efforts required, risk and uncertainty, dependencies. They don't map directly on the basis of hours or days, on the basis of time, but teams usually builds a shared understanding over the time. So teams collaborate, teams collectively decides what type of a task required, what type of a points, and it's be, understanding based these points get decided and assigned to the particular task. So why agile teams using these story points instead of hours? It's really not random decision. It's actually a genius. Why a genius step, a genius decision? Let's understand why. Uh, our measures time, but they can't capture the complexity of the task or the risk included while completing these particular tasks. Imagine there are two tasks. One takes 3 hours, but it's really super tricky, and another takes 10 hours, but it's straightforward and simple. Which one is harder? So, relatively, we are comparing. So, if we are comparing on the basis of time, there may be delays are there, deadline we normally cross. So, this is not a correct estimation. So, story points accounts the efforts, uncertainty, and risk, things ours can't predict directly. So plus it's a early hourly estimation can stress the deadline, and with teams with the unrealistic deadlines are there. So we sometimes we can't meet those deadlines if we estimate our tasks on the basis of efforts or times. Now, to understand how to calculate and how to assign the story points to particular tasks, let's understand what exactly the story is. So, in short, story is nothing but a simple task or a feature description that we want to complete, and it will be written as per the users and end users understanding. So consider in your project you want to perform, you want to complete one user auth module. User auth module may contain lots of different small tasks, and those small tasks, on the basis of user requirement, we divide those small tasks, and those small tasks are considered as a user story. So here is one user story we have written. So name is the make us login form and apply validation to those form, and the story is like, okay, we are creating the user form. It should have a 2 input, one login ID and one another username, and it should apply the validation. This is the simple user story we consider. Now we assign points to these user stories and how we do these things. Let's understand, but how these stories and how these things get divided, let's understand first of all. So initially there is an initiative, then there is an epic. We consider it as a module or scalably large tasks. Those large tasks are divided into the story, or maybe we call it as a task 1, task 2, and then there are the subtasks of that tasks. So let's take one example of a user story. One, as a user, I want to log in with the email ID and password so that I can access my account. The complexity of this thing is little bit not complex. It's a low complexity and standard functionality and well known. This is a simple task. If it's required is small, you just required UI with a login API, and risk is low. So estimation is 2 story points. We have given the 2 story points of such kinds of a story. Another one is that if you want to reset the username, reset the password, so complexity, we considered it as a medium because we want to require some verification from our registered login ID. So needs email services and token expiry logic and error handling is largely included in these things. So efforts are moderate, and risk, maybe there are some risks that integration with the email provider takes some time and the complexity is increased. So estimation, we considered it as a 5 story points. So based on a task, complexity, uncertainty, and risk included in that task, we assign the story points to it. So epic is nothing but a module. Story is nothing but a small task to be completed in a less amount of time, or we can say as a short-term goal. And story points are the points assigned to that particular task. Based, the points decided collectively within the team. There will be a discussion that which story requires this much of point and which one will be the little bit complex. And based on a 3 criteria, we decide these things. Some people normally measures the task estimation in the form of a time, which is not that much useful, meaningful, and truthful too. So let's understand what normally we do after story creation. Consider we created the story. When we decide to whom this stories has been assigned, what will be the sprint, what will be the module name for this particular story, what is the related labels included in it. And finally, we can see this user story like this. And we need to assign the story points also. Okay. So we normally assign the story points, and after that, we finally view the story, complexity, and all these things has been displayed. So this particular example I have taken from the Jira software. So based on the software you are using, or based on this particular activity you are doing with any kind of a framework. So I'm considering Jira as a, for the example, I have considered Jira as a software for this story point calculation and all. So in Jira, these are the few points, these are the few forms you have to fulfill, and the story has been created, assigned to the particular member, and like this it happens. So what exactly the story points are, how it's get calculated and all, that's understand. So story points are a way to estimate the efforts needed to implement the product backlog items. So story points are a way to size work in the product development and showing how big or complex tasks, and we compare those tasks, and team can plan and deliver the product more productivity, more effortlessly. Okay. So story points are units in which we measures the task completion, or it is required, efforts required to fully implement a product backlog items. Key characteristics are relative sizing. We compare multiple products with each other, and based on that we calculate it. There are the they actually calculate the complexity of a task, amount of work, risk involved, while they don't directly relate it with the hours, and they help the team forecast timeliness and plan better through the velocity. Okay. So we need story points for the estimation. So story points is not only the efforts, but the combination of these three factors: complexity, risk, dependencies, and business values associated with it. So for example, as a data entry operator, I want to copy the data from 10,000 different notepads into the single tool. So this is little bit complex functionality. And the another one, if you want to put the data in a single form with a single input data with a single notepad. So this, the complexity is different. So based on the complexity and risk, the story points has been calculated. So simply we can't measure it on the basis of time and all. So how we are going to estimate these points? How we are going to decide that this particular story should have these amount of points and all? So story point estimation. So how story points are measured? They are not measured on the basis of a days and hours. The key things to remember while you are estimating the story points, they are based on a team consensus, and everyone should agree on the same scale, and they should reflect their efforts, risk, uncertainty, and all these things. So these things we have to take care of when we are estimating the story points. So how normally we estimate it? Relative estimation is there and absolute estimation is there. So there are different ways when we are talking about the estimation. Okay. So how we are going to estimate? How we normally say it should be a one story point, should be a 1 day, or how we are going to decide it. So let's consider, if we consider that one story point is nothing but a 1 day. So we can say that A task contains 1 day to complete and B task contain 2 days to complete, because the B task size is double than the A task, right? So now if we ask the particular team, so let's compare these two atoms or a task. They are same, they require same efforts? Obviously not, because the you can see that the block backlog atom B is twice the amount of efforts of backlog atom A. So if we were to give the product backlog atom to the one person, what would happen? Okay, so consider there are the two developers. One is the experienced one, and another one is nothing but a fresher or have less experience compared to the other. So is they are requiring same time to complete these things? Obviously not, right? So how they are going to manage? A common mistakes that lot of teams make is say one point just measure 1 day, and it's not correct, because you have a different workforce with you. They have a different experience. They have a different time to complete the same task. So we can't measure the same particular task in the form of time or hour. Why? What will be the problem when we are completing, we are just assigning hour or scale on the basis of time? Okay. So if consider there is a more experienced developer is there, he will complete or she will complete the A task in a half day, and obviously by calculating B task in a 1 day. But if you say that we same task we assign to the less experienced developer, it may require 2 days to complete the task, and the B task require 4 days to completion. So we can't be on the same scale when we are considering this kind of a absolute estimation. So this is the problem with the absolute estimation and how you are going to do these things. Okay. And one more problem is, like when requirement changes, estimate also get changed. So complexity increase, requirement change. So in these cases, we can't consider the absolute estimation as an correct productive way to estimate the efforts. Okay. Now, one more thing that is uh, One day is or hourly basis estimation is little bit difficult when we are considering these days, and another is nothing but if requirement changes, these things may occur, our estimation time will get changed. So story point versus hours, one more comparison is there. So story point approach is relative, team based, account for uncertainty, fast senses, no emotional attachment. Yeah, one more thing I want to include is when you are considering absolute estimation, there is an emotional attachment. So we can say that, okay, this particular developer is nothing but close to me. So we can assign more days, and kind of emotional sentiments are there when we are assigning the task. So our approach is absolute estimation, individual based on individual functionality, individual capacity. False precision is there when lengthy emotional commitments are there. Okay, so these are the two differences. So we can say that story point approach is a better than our approach. Okay, so let's go ahead with how we now normally calculate it. There is a velocity tracking, reduce pressure, team consensus. Okay, so relative complexity is easier to judge rather than the absolute one. So we can say that the relative estimation means that we judge how big or complex the task is with respect to the other task, and one of the unit of the complexity that can be used as a story point estimation. So this is the relative estimation. If we can say we are comparing one product, we are keeping the one task as a reference, and based on that task, we are comparing other tasks and we are assigning points to it. So if we consider task A contains one story point, obviously task B is double, complexity is double. So we can say that task B assigned 2 story points. If we see the task C, it is 5 times complex than the task A. So that's why it's assigned 5 story points. But when you see the task D, which is half of the task A, so we are assigning 0.5 as a story point to that particular task. And 3 is nothing but a little bit bigger than the B, so it's a 3 story point. So in this relative estimation, how we assign the story points, we compare one story as a reference story, and based on that, we calculate the other story points. So the absolute estimation has a kind of an emotional attachment to it. If you estimate a task to take 10 hours and it's ended up taking you the 30 hours, then what can you tell to your manager? Why didn't you why are you taking this much of extra time? So it could be a little bit frustrating for the people, as it could turn into the blaming games if we are not able to finish the task on defined deadlines. So for that is the main reason we are accepting this relative estimation. We are comparing two tasks, making one task as a reference, and based on that, we are deciding the estimation. Okay. So the key factors in the story point estimation is how we decide the story points, how we decide the reference task is based on amount of work, complexity, and risk and uncertainty. So based on these 3 criterias, we decide the what will be the assigned story point to the particular story. So story points take into the account on the basis of the efforts, amount of work to do, risk and uncertainty, and complexity. So the consider the task of folding papers in first task is to fold 10 papers per second, or we can say we can consider it as a 10 papers we can fold in a 10 seconds. But consider if you want to fold 100 papers, so the same action is there, but the second task is not uh, it will not take that much of time, right? It should take 100 more seconds to complete that. So first one uh, second task will require the more time rather than comparing the first one, like 10 papers will take less time, 100 papers will take more time for the folding action. The amount of risk and uncertainty in the user story should affect the story point estimation. If a team is asked to estimate the user story, and we have to assign the we are observing the uncertainty and risk in those things, then obviously that thing you should have to consider, because that also take more points, more time, as well as it should, the weightage of what the points is little bit more. So last thing to be considered when the estimation is happening is nothing but a complexity. So it should also consider when we are providing a story point estimation. And if we want to take an example, like previously we want to fold the paper, but now we want to fold the paper and create the aeroplanes from it. So obviously the complexity of this particular task is a little bit more than the folding the paper simply. So the complexity also we have to consider when we are estimating the story points. Normally, how exact story points calculated? In the most cases, a story point uses the Fibonacci sequence as a scale. Some teams will use the t-shirt sizing as a major point estimation. So we considered it as a one task, 0.5 or 0, and based on that reference task, we are assigning these 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 kind of a Fibonacci series story points to assign the points to the story. The efforts required to implement a user story. Story points remove any emotional attachment which is related to the task completion. So why Fibonacci series? The Fibonacci sequence is used because it reflects the increasing uncertainty, focuses meaningful discussion among the group, among your team, and prevent false precisions by limiting available choices. So key insight is the larger the story, the more uncertainty exists, which is reflected in the growing gaps between the Fibonacci series. So that's why the when estimating the story points, it get Fibonacci sequence is used normally. So how the this story points has been decided. So point estimation is typically performed during the product backlog refinement sessions meeting, and the product backlog is evaluated by the team who is responsible to turn the product backlog items into the product. And it is based on the customer's requirement, and the product owner does not contribute to estimate it, but he will have the responsibility to explain what the product backlog item is about in order to estimate user story. So basically, during the meeting, these things happens. The team will decide which task should have what kind of a points. The product owner is not directly included in these kinds of a sessions, but it should clearly mention the user requirements. Next, estimation workshop, how exactly it's happened. Consider normally one as a particular story as a reference user story, and it assign this particular point to that story. Now, this story has been compared to the other related task, and based on those other related tasks, we decide that the user two task will be the before user one story or after. So based on the relative comparison, these sequences has been decided. Consider US contains sorry, this reference user story contains 5 story points, then this one may contain 3, and US3 may contain 1. US1 may contain 8 story points, and like this, in the form of a Fibonacci series, this points has been assigned to the user stories. So each team would have to find out 1 or 2 baseline stories as a reference. So these group of stories don't need to be smallest one, but it should be the ones that everyone within the team understand and can resonate with while defining the story point estimation. Now let's go ahead. So everyone from the development team should be involved while estimating the user stories. So all the team members should know aware about what exactly the user story one, and based on that user story one, we compare the related user stories and assign the story points to them. Now, how exactly the velocity has been decided while defining the story points? So velocity is nothing but the average story points completed per sprint. Now, sprint is nothing but a module. Okay, so for example, one sprint contains the 18 story points. 18 story points having how many tasks? Sprint 2 contain 22 story points and like this. So average velocity is 20 story points. It means you can assign 20 tasks under the or 20 tasks having the sum of the story points as a 20. So one sprint contains the story point 20 average. So used for forecasting sprint capacity and timeliness. So we normally divide the task in such a way that the task contain 20 story point each. So the scale is relative and not tied to the hours. Velocity help forecast the delivery. A team's velocity and then subsequently using it to determine the team's long-term release plan. Why velocity is mentioned? Because if we want to plan, long-term actions are there, long-term uh, tasks are there. To complete those things, we can determine what will be the velocity of our team and how it get completed, what will be the estimation of product completion and all these things. For that, this has been calculated. So in short, story points are the effort from the development team's perspective to complete a particular piece of work. Story points are used to measure the size of a product backlog team, and the size is determined based on the complexity, physical size, risk associated with that work. Story points work as a relative units of measure to deliver the effects required, and the work atom is done. So why large stories are problematic? So what do you do? Story splitting strategies are there. So consider your stories are large, complex, and problematic. So what you will do, how you going to assign the story points? So vertical slicing, we can divide the whole task into small subtasks. By user journey steps, split the complex workflows into individual steps. So we can consider each step as a different user story and assign the story points to it. By acceptance criteria, turn each major acceptance criteria into the own story. There is acceptance criteria when your user normally accepts your product. So based on that criteria also, you can divide the whole product. By technical implementation, when business slicing isn't obvious, split by the technical layers. Okay, so you can say the view is one more layer, or you can say under the view UI is there, CSS is there. So based on a technical slicing also, you can divide the large stories. Okay. So let's go ahead with the common mistakes which we have to avoid while assigning or creating the story points. So translating them into the hours, big no. Averaging estimates, no. Taking the average of different estimations loses the valuable discussion and creates the artificial precision. So don't average the estimation. Adjusting mid sprints, don't adjust the reference sprint here and there. Okay. Using it as a performance matrix. Story points should never be used as a measure individual or team's productivity. No, we are assigning it's a roughly and relative manner to complete our work done on time and collectively. So you can't consider it as a performance matrix. Individual based estimation, no individual based estimation. This is not the whole and soul idea behind the story points. Adjusting points based on who will do the work. The team ownerships and collaboration is important here. So it's not an individual based one. And comforting to the experts. So listen the team, defer to the refer to the experts, and it will reduce the diverse diversification of task assigned to you. So let's go ahead with the best practices. Recommended approach for the effective story point estimation. involve entire team. You have to take care of the whole team members, every team member's perspectives on these things. Use reference stories, compare the stories. Comparison with the reference story is really important. Break down the large stories, review in the retrospectives way. So regularly discuss and estimate the accuracy of story points will improve the story points over the time. Sorry. Track the velocity, regularly measures and review the team velocity to improve the future sprint planning and accuracy. Value the discussion. So whatever you are discussing during the story point estimation, it is always not just the final number. It's not just a final number assigned to the particular story. Need the discussion, important discussion should be included there, and each and every team member should be included. And these are the few best practices while estimating the story point. So these are the few highlights of the story point. Relative estimation compares the task assigned each other rather than the absolute measures like time and weight. Next, story point represents the efforts by considering the work amount, risk, complexity, not just time. We normally decided and calculated on the basis of a Fibonacci sequence, or you can say the t-shirt sizing are the common scales for the story point estimation. Estimation team should actively involve developers, designers, testers for the diverse input. The product owners explain backlog items but do not estimate it. Team do the estimation collaboratively. Using the baseline stories as a reference ensure the consistent and relative sizing of user stories. So these are the few basic things which we have to take in care about the story points, and these are the few concepts which we are using while calculating the story points. So this is all about the introductory or introduction of story points. Let's see you in the next session. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.